Guys, hello and welcome to the Makeflix virtual launch party of Haunting Fear on Blu-ray from Retro Media. This is what we are here to talk about, what we are here to celebrate. I see a lot of familiar faces in the chat window over to the right of my screen. I just want to say hey to everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This is tremendously exciting. This is a movie that really is, you heard the music just a second ago. This is such an atmospheric, such a fantastic piece of horror, thriller, chiller cinema, and we are going to talk to both the star, Brinke Stevens, and to the director and the writer, Fred Olen Ray. We're also going to do a Q&A here, so if you've got questions for anybody here, go ahead and submit those, but we're going to hold those until a little further into our live stream here, into the party. So go ahead and ask them and we'll save them until the end. And I'll remind you throughout, hey, good time to get the questions in. So thanks to everybody for being here. And you know what, without further ado, let's just start bringing in our guests. Let's start with the star of Haunting Fear. You know her from the Slumber Party Massacre, Slave Girls from Beyond Infinity, Sorority Babes, and the Slimeball Bolorama, Nightmare Sisters. She became a member of Mensa while still in high school. Actor, writer, producer, director, and our favorite biologist, the star of Haunting Fear, Brinke Stevens.
Thank you all for tuning in. I'm so happy to be here with everyone. Hi, Rhonda. Hi, Derek.
It's so great. This is such an exciting occasion, and for you especially. I mean, this movie is such a showcase for. I mean, there's so many layers to this performance, right? I have to imagine. I mean, you are a Scream Queen icon, But this movie is more than that, right? This has psychological stuff to it. Tell us a little bit about what it was like to kind of dig into this performance.
Whenever anyone asks me what's the favorite movie that I've been in, I always say Haunting Fair. And part of it is because I'm in almost the entire movie. It's not just a one-day part. And also I live till the end. You know, I don't die in this movie, which is unusual. But when he gave me a script, I thought he wanted me to play the sexy secretary, which is a much smaller role. And I said, okay, fine. Yeah, that sounds good. And he's like, no, 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 I want you for the lead. So this was the biggest role I had ever had, and maybe that I've ever had since. And I'm a woman who is slowly going crazy. So on any given day of shooting, I had to ask, how crazy am I today? Which was a lot of fun, you know, trying to get into that character.
Absolutely. Well, you know, do you have any? How did you get into the character? Because it's again, it's kind of a different, deeper thing. It's as you say, it's kind of that madness. Did you have any sort of a process or any sort of a method?
Well, that's the neat thing about being a scream queen or any kind of actor is that you have to express things in your roles that you've never done in real life. Like I've never been possessed by a demon or turned into a vampire or gone insane. So you just kind of wing it. And the makeup helped a lot toward the end. They had done me in that scary makeup at the end, and I went in the bathroom and looked in the mirror, and I'm like, whoa, oh my God. I scared myself. So the makeup really, really helped toward the end there.
I understand that. Yeah. How does it feel that, I mean, this was a movie that has not been widely available for kind of a long time. It's been a little bit hard to find for a while. How does it feel just to have this back in circulation in a beautiful, I need to say, this is a beautiful high definition. It's been transferred from the 35 millimeter camera negative, and it looks gorgeous. And now people can discover, like future generations can discover this. How does that feel?
I am so happy it's finally available because it was only ever on VHS, except for some bootleg DVDs that
Yes.
were unauthorized. And I'm so happy that Fred decided to bring it out and really go all out with it. I mean, he had the cover painting made just for this. He had the insert of the trading card double-sided. He did a commentary track, and he really did it up right. So it's quite the showpiece. I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, but I think that's a great segue to bring in Fred himself. So, guys, Fred Olen Ray has directed over 150 projects, including Scalps, Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers, Alienator, Evil Tunes. He wrestled in the squared circle as fabulous Freddie Valentine. He's the founder of Retro Media, the writer and director of Haunting Fear, Fred Olen Ray. Welcome, Fred.
Hi.
So, it's here. We're celebrating the arrival of this movie, 1990. Now it's 2021, and people are finding this movie all over again. How does it feel?
Well, you know, I'm very happy. I mean, I waited a long, long time to do this because, and people say, well, why did it take this long? You know, because there was a laser disc at one point. And we had signed a contract that didn't expire until last year, if you can believe it. It expired last year, and I've waited 30 years to be able to do this. So I'm very happy. It was one of the first things on my mind, and I watched my contract expiration date like a hawk.
So this is something that was kind of held up by licensing and
yes, and I believe that the people who had the licensing, which was Trauma, they were responsible for certain legal obligations when they distributed the film, and I don't think they wanted to live up to those obligations, so they never pursued it. Plus, this is the day of what do you call it? This is the day of Blu-ray and HD, and they didn't have access to the negative, so without that, all they had was an old 1-inch copy. And so when we had a chance to transfer the 35 millimeter original cut camera negatives, we jumped at it. And I think it's beautiful.
It's gorgeous. It looks absolutely wonderful. And I do want to mention too that card here, because they do include sort of a double-sided, I call them trading cards. They're bubblegum cards, but
it's a trading card. And on one side, there's this beautiful picture of Brink. And I don't know if you understand that these were printed in Braille. So you can like touch the. It's really very exciting. Just so you know, I have the feed up here on my computer, but it appears to be almost a minute behind what's actually happening.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe there's a minute delay or 30-second delay or something, but be that as it may, because I can't see any photos you put up or anything until they're way after.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Well, can you tell us a little bit about sort of where the idea for Haunting Fear came from? You know, there's a rich tradition of, you know, there's the Roger Corman Poe cycle. And this is sort of, it kind of fits into that. Could you talk to us a little bit about the origin of the story?
Well, this came from a time when they were doing remakes of Edgar Allan Poe films. Roger, I think, had made Red Death over again, and Morella, and Harry Allen Towers, and Cannon Films were making some Poe type films. But it was really meant to be an H.G. Wells Food of the Gods movie. And to that end, I had commissioned a script called Empire of the Rats. And I had set up everything. I'd set up Jan Michael Vincent. I'd set up all this stuff. And the script came in, and I didn't like it. And it wasn't long enough. And I was having breakfast with Bob Quarry one morning. And I said, Bob, I'm in a real fix here. I've got this movie. Everything's pretty much ready to go, but I don't have a script. And Bob said, oh, Fred, you know, you got something at home you can film, I'm sure. So I went home from breakfast, and I looked around, and I had about 40 pages of a script called Haunting Fear. And I thought, well, you know, maybe he's right. And so I plowed into that, and I finished that script, and we made it instead of the other movie. And I'm probably glad that I did, you know, because it turned out to be one of my favorite films. But it was one of the shorter scripts that we ever had. But I kept thinking that the problem when you make these low budget films is that you're so overwhelmed every day that there's no time to properly develop a scene. The actors have to kind of rush in, hit their marks, say their lines, and then you move on. I thought, well, if I had less pages, then I could devote more time into developing the scenes. And if you watch the movie, there's a lot of dollying. There's a lot of camera movement and the slow developing scenes, like where Brink comes out and she lays on the stairs because she's so tired. And you see the camera just kind of moving in. And the stuff where she's in the kitchen at night and she's seeing the coffee percolate and the clock tick on the wall. In a normal quickie movie, you wouldn't have time to take that scene and explore it. But having a shorter script, we did, and it became one of the longer movies that we made. I think it's about 87 or 88 minutes long. Mm-hmm. It's actually on the long side for us.
You know, I was wondering, this was I believe you shot this in 6 days, correct?
Yes. That was the way we did them back then, because these were 35 millimeter movies. They were Screen Actors Guild. We had name stars and stuff in them. And there was a profit margin that you knew there was a ceiling of what you could probably do. So 6 days, 6 to 8 was about, because that's how long you could rent a camera for. They had what's called a 3-day week. If you paid for 3 days, you could have it for the whole week. It's called a 3-day week. So if you pick it up on a Friday and don't return it till a week from Monday, you have a potential of I don't know, don't do the math. It could be 6, it could be 8 days, whatever it is, if you pushed it. And if you shot Friday night after picking the camera up, you get an extra half a day. Mm-hmm. So all these movies were tried to be made using a 1-week camera rental.
I've always wondered how long those days were. Are we talking about 12-hour days? Or are we talking about like 20-hour days?
Oh, no. In movie land, lunch is 30 minutes after the last person goes through line, which usually makes it 40 minutes. It takes 10 minutes to get through line, so you have a 40-minute lunch. So if you come in at 7 a.m., you don't hit 12 hours until 7:40 p.m., and at that point, you owe people another meal, which is called second meal. And usually you do a walking second meal, which is submarine sandwiches, burgers, so people can keep working while they eat, because nobody wants to stay there. There's usually one day on every movie that is a bear. There's one day where no matter what you do, you just can't get out on time. But generally, it's 7 in the morning till 7:40 in the evening, or a little earlier if you want to give the crew, if you're wrapping out the entire location into a truck to move locations, you try to finish earlier. Nowadays, like this was a movie that if we wanted a night scene, even inside the house, we would film it at night. Now we would just black out the windows. But back then we were too dumb to do that. We would actually film into the night, even though we were inside, where we could have just put a black drape over the window. So in most cases, a lot of these movies were shot at night, and it was very tiring. It was very tiring to do these, I think.
Yeah. You tell a story in the commentary. It's an excellent commentary, by the way. You share it with a rooster, but it somehow works.
That rooster's on the other side of this wall right now.
Maybe we'll hear him. He'll chime in. But it's a great commentary, and there's a lot of stuff that I learned through. I mean, you just give a lot of process information, and you talk about the coast, how you had people for Jan Michael Vincent for one day. So Brink, I wanted to ask you. You share scenes with a lot of you share Jan Michael Vincent. You've got a scene with Michael Berryman, Jay Richardson, of course, Delia Shepard, I believe, Karen Black. Do you have any stories or anything you can tell us about working with these people during this movie?
I had never worked with Michael Berryman before this film, but I always admired his movies. And so I was a little intimidated when I met him, which was at a real kind of mortuary. And he's so strange looking, and I was really nervous. And I said, when he was going to do the autopsy, I said, I hope your hands are warm. And he said, I've kept them in the freezer all morning for you. And that broke the ice. And then it was great. And I loved working with Karen Black. She's an interesting actress. If you watch her, like when she gets the phone call, she's very physical in her acting. She doesn't just deliver a line. She does her hair and she does some expressions, and she's just fascinating to watch. I loved her in Burnt Offerings, and it was such an honor to be able to work with her. And Jan Michael Vincent, ditto, although he was kind of in his difficult phase. Do you remember that, Fred? He wasn't real cooperative.
But he wasn't drinking, though. The two movies we did with him was when he was really trying to, get it together.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, he was just like, I remember he showed up at the house, and he had a dressing room upstairs. And he went straight upstairs and turned the TV on and was watching cartoons. And you sent me up to bring him down because we needed him. And he immediately turned to me and snapped. And he said, just sit there and don't say anything. And so I had to sit there until he finished watching this cartoon. It was strange.
I can't believe I let him drive my car.
Oh, yeah. But he was good. He really, did the role the right way. I thought he was quite good in that.
It was one of those. That's one of those things you do in these films. Is if you have a person for only a day, you try to make it look like they worked a lot more than one day. So I mean, the part is written specifically with that in mind. So we had him watching the house in a car, which allowed us to shoot a lot of footage very quickly and then cut it all throughout the film. But he really was. He was in a lot of places. He went, I don't know what house he went to see Bob Quarry at, but there was a scene which was not shot at this house where he saw Bob Quarry, and then we moved over to Penny Cooper's house, and we did all those car bits, and then he came to the door and you gave him a little tour of the house. Then he came around the backyard and there was a little scene in the backyard. Then he comes in the house and you try to kill him. That's pretty amazing for one day.
It really
I'll give myself credit for that one.
I want to talk about the locations because one of the things, Fred, you've always excelled at maximizing the production value of a particular location. And you talk about Penny Cooper's house. So that was your caterer, if I remember correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Penny was, she was a huge African-American lady, and she had a daughter, and they cooked our food in that very kitchen that we filmed in, and they used to bring it to our locations. And she made a peach cobbler that everybody was just incredibly in love with. And one time she suggested that we look at her house maybe to film there. And I went over and I looked at it, and it was kind of a cool place. And it had the basement and had all this stuff. And so we thought, okay, but the weird thing was, and of course people may have seen or heard the commentary, but there weren't any real bedrooms to use. And so we had to turn this upper loft like into Brink and them's bedroom. But the house was being occupied by women who were like, it was a halfway house for like recovering drug addicts or alcoholics or whatever. They were all women, and they couldn't have a phone. They weren't allowed. This was before cell phones. They weren't allowed to have a telephone. So there's a payphone on the wall at the bottom of the stairs. When you come down the stairs and you look to the left, there's a payphone there. Now we hung a piece of cloth over it to hide it, but it's in some shots. And it was a very strange, because every once in a while, someone weird would walk up and down the stairs that we didn't know who it was. But this house then sort of semi became popular. We did Little Devils there. We shot a little bit of Mind Twister, the Telly Savalas movie. We shot the front of the house and the front door. And then guys like Rick Sloan would come along, of course. And Gary Graver, I think, shot Evil Spirits there. So then everybody started going there. When that's the thing. Whenever I would do something, the next thing you know is everybody else would do it. So you do see this house in a few movies.
Gotcha. I just want to
like that Harvard Street house that we shot. They shot Teenage Exorcist and Evil Tunes, and I shot it the first time in Inner Sanctum. And when I shot in Inner Sanctum, all of a sudden, all my filmmaking friends just started going to that house. So that house you see as well in a lot of films.
I do have a question about this location, and I'm almost embarrassed to ask this, but it's a legitimate question. I've been wondering. It's not a spoiler for the end of the movie, but there's a knife and there's a linoleum floor, and I'm just wondering, since that was someone's house, did you really stab the linoleum floor? And was that a conversation after you guys called a wrap?
You would have to be there. Places look much different on film than they do in person. Penny was a huge person. And she sat in a special chair in the living room, which was carpeted. And where her feet rested on the ground, the carpeting was worn away in the shape of 2 feet, right through the carpet to the floor. And I looked at it one day because we'd moved all the furniture. And I said, "What is that?" And they said, "That's where Jabba the Hutt sits." I'm not kidding. One of the creepy. And I went, "Oh my God, that's where Penny sits." And her feet had worn through the carpeting all the way to the wood. So to say that the house was probably, the linoleum floor probably had 1 million cuts in it. I will say, though, that we did stick the knife in the floor and no one was ever the wiser or cared. It's not like we hid it.
Wasn't that kind of an homage to Karen Black's movie, the
Well, that whole scene is right from Trilogy of Terror, right?
Yeah.
Sitting, waiting. It's just like that. And I did it again in a Lifetime movie, which is actually almost a remake of Haunting Fear. It's called Deadly Shores. It's a lighthouse movie, but partway through, and I was already in Buffalo to film the movie when they said they wanted the heroine to go crazy and kill everyone. And this was like days before the shoot. And I said, "You know what? I've done this before." So I went and I rewrote the end of the script, and I literally did Haunting Fear. They trap a girl in a lighthouse and she goes crazy. She gets loose. She chases them down out front, just like in the other movie. Same setups, because it worked so great when Brink did it. And then they come in and they find the girl in the kitchen now she's got a blind person's cane and she's just tapping on the floor. So yeah, that's Trilogy of Terror.
It's an homage to the classic.
Again, we didn't hide it. I mean, Karen Black's in the movie, for God's sake.
Yeah. It's a great cast, and it's also a great screenplay. I want to talk about the screenplay, but also want to talk about the score and the cinematography. Gary Graver is just fantastic in this with his work on this movie.
Yeah.
Let's go with that. When Gary Graver shoots, he makes things look like you spent millions on cinematography. Can you just talk a little bit about him and your experience with him?
Well, you never realize how good Gary's work was until you see it from the original camera negative. The answer print never shows the high quality. I was stunned. There's a scene where Brink goes into the kitchen and gets a knife because she's heard a noise. As she comes out, she passes through a shadow, and by the doorway, she falls into another pool of light before she goes out. And I'm looking at this going, this is just great. You're talking about a 6-day movie, and these were hot lights. These aren't like the fluorescent banks and China balls people use today. These were hot lights, and they're harsh. And I thought he did a great job. And of course, much of Hollywood thought Gary did a great job. He certainly worked for some of the greatest filmmakers of all time. And a lot of people don't realize that he shot part of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and he shot part of Enter the Dragon, and The Howling. I mean, you know, Gary had his thumb in a lot of stuff. And then, of course, you know, everybody goes on about the Orson Welles films. I think his talent in the Orson Welles films was simply being able to move quickly enough to keep up with a person like Orson, whose mind was changing constantly. The lighting in the Welles films is almost documentary style because there were no scripts, and so, but still, Gary did an amazing job, and Brink never looked lovelier.
Agreed. Very lovely.
What else? A good lighting.
Well, good lighting can only do so much. The screenplay for this it's a wonderful screenplay, and I feel like it sort of reveals the story as it goes. Like there are secrets. There's you know, we learn more about the characters as the movie goes on, it's just very well constructed. So Brink, did when you read the screenplay, when you're looking at this and you're seeing that that you're going to get to perform in this, did it feel elevated to you? Did you recognize that this is it's just a smart, tight screenplay?
Mm-hmm. It is. And I like, as I said before, I like the evolution of my character.
Yes.
How she just wants to be loved. And, you know, Jay is off screwing Delia Shepard, and I feel like I'm not getting the attention I need at home. And, you know, he's so supercilious, like, oh, it's okay, honey, you know, and but he just clearly doesn't care. And I like the subplot where he owes gambling debts, so we get to bring in Robert Quarry, and Jan Michael Vincent has more to do that way. So it was very multi-layered, and there were a lot of great little subplots and things going on.
Mm-hmm. I just want to remind people that we are doing a Q&A later in this video, so go ahead and submit questions, and we're going to get to those in just a few minutes here. Just didn't want anybody to think we're ignoring questions. We see them, but we're going to save them for just a little bit later. And there's so much knowledge in this chat right now, so it's going to be really exciting. Fred, I want to ask you a question just about retro media in general. You brought up, you know, Orson Welles. You kind of triggered my mind. The retro media label, you know, a lot of your films are on the label that you've created, but you also dig really deep into a lot of, you know, monogram films, PRC stuff. What is the what's your goal? What's the game plan with retro media?
Well, you know, this goes way back to 20 years ago when DVD was just starting to come around strong, and people were coming to me wanting to license Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. And I said, listen, I don't want somebody to cherry pick my library. I want a way to get all of the films out, not just because, you know, so I just said, you know what, I'm going to start my own label. And then once you start your own label, you realize that within a year, you're going to be out of your own movies. You only own so many films. So if you want to stay in business, if it's something you're serious about, then you have to start, you know, putting together other films to keep the product line going. And so I kind of put out things that I was interested in, because it is a boutique company. There's no staff. There's no office on Sunset. Our stuff it starts at a manufacturer's, and then it goes to a fulfillment warehouse where I don't even see it. And then I fulfill orders, or we ship them to people who want them. And it's the only way it could be done. For a while, I was only doing Amazon because, again, there's no staff. There's no one here to do bookkeeping. There's no one here to keep track of inventory. And then, you know, JR and I, we've known each other for 20 some years, maybe more. We started doing a little business, and I liked it. I liked shipping directly to him. I had some troubles with Amazon because they were taking delivery of 200 units and then sitting on them for 30 days before they would make them available. And I said, well, what's the purpose, and how can I stay on top of this? JR said, I can make this available tomorrow. And I said, you know what? I like that. So I gave him a 30-day exclusive for this and the Monster Maker King of the Zombies double feature. And I may do that going forward, because instead of fans sitting there wondering when Amazon will actually finally make stuff that they've had on hand for a month available, they can actually have it next week. They can have it 3 days from now. So it works for me, and I hope it works for the fans. And this is the first time somebody's wanted to do something like this. So my hat's off to Makeflix.
I think it's great, and it's a great partnership. Do you have personal affection for these movies yourself? Because it seems like you do, and they seem to come from good sources as well.
Well, you know, we do a lot of restoration, which I look at some things, and I've seen some things, and I'm not calling names out because these are big companies and they do great work. But I look at stuff and I say, you know what? If you gave me 8 hours, I could clean this up to a point that would be, you know, like I saw Flesh Pot on 42nd Street on Turner Classics. There's a movie that one pass through a dust busting software would have fixed 80% of all the imperfections on that film. And we work on the soundtracks. If you listen to those old Monogram films, I mean, there's no hiss, very little crackling, popping, white specks, scratches and stuff. We hand restore these films to do. And I'll tell you, we did The Wasp Woman, and we did, I thought, a very great job. And then Roger Corman asks me, could he have access to the HD masters of the films that I had done? And then next thing you know, Wasp Woman's out on another label. I might be Shout Factory, who has a deal with Roger or something, but I really believe that's my master. Well, so it's a compliment that Roger would take my master and then give it to somebody else to put out in competition with me. Yeah.
Brink, I've seen this question pop up a couple of times. I'm just going to go ahead and ask it. A lot of people are talking about a sequel. They're saying, I mean, it's a perfect, you know, we're in the era of the sequel, the franchise film. This is the character Victoria. Would you like to reprise the role again?
Well, it's a little bit late now, 30 years. I actually did write a script that was a sequel called Buried Nightmares. And in my script, it turns out that Victoria has escaped at the end, and she has total amnesia, and she ends up in a halfway house for a while and eventually gets out, but her past catches up with her. And that Delia had another boyfriend who comes after her and wants the house and different things. But I think Fred felt that too much time had elapsed. This was probably 10 years later, that people wouldn't really care about the storyline so much anymore.
Well, the film had been out of circulation. And most people tell you that they couldn't even find a copy of it or a legal copy of it. But I believe there was a fellow, and he did buy an option on your script. I think his name was Ted Chalmers. I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. Somebody did buy an option for like a year or so on that, way back in the day, but it didn't materialize the show. We're not big for sequels. People talk about Hollywood Chainsaw and stuff like that, and I don't think you can recreate some of these things. They were a product of their time, and they were made for a specific audience and a market at the time. Like, it's just like when they tried to make a sequel to Flesh Gordon, it was terrible. In most cases, sequels don't work because you're trying to imitate something that happened as a natural freak of nature. You can't really just recreate it. And not like any of these films are so glamorous that you can't tread on their legacy. It's just, I think, that people's expectations, because you watch a dated movie like Evil Tunes or something now, and it's quaint for its time and you are forgiving. But if somebody brought a brand new movie out that was like that, audiences may not be as accepting of it today.
I understand that, like the burden of expectation and having lived with something for 30 years, and then, can you do justice to it? It's the Friends reunion, right? Like if they ever do a Friends reunion, can it possibly live up to the expectation? But some of us would like to see what the story would look like 30 years later.
Well, it's like the Munsters or the Gilligan's Island. I mean, the same exact people who wrote a series that will play forever come back 10 years later and try to make a TV movie, and it has none of the charm or funny, and it's nothing than the original Munsters. And even the same cast. They've got one TV movie that had the same cast. It didn't work. Same thing with Gilligan's Island. People will watch the original Gilligan's Island till the day they die. Those Gilligan's Islands TV movies made by the exact same people don't seem to actually understand what made their original show work. They can't duplicate it.
So, Brink, I guess we need to see the screenplay now. It needs to be printed as a novel or write it in novel form. There we go.
Yeah, exactly. I think the film still holds up 30 years later. I don't think it feels so dated. You
Mm.
know, it's kind of an eternal story, and the
I think it's
costumes.
because it's serious. If it had been a
Yeah,
comedy and had that 1980s or 1990s humor, I think it would not hold up as well. But as a drama, I think it does. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the wardrobe has changed, but the basic human things are still the same now as they always were.
That's a great segue into kind of where I want to wind things down with this, and then we can move into the Q&A. So again, questions, ask them now. We'll get to them in just a second. But what do you see the legacy for this movie being? I mean, it's these years later. We now have a Blu-ray, and it has a whole new life. Arguably, the Blu-ray collecting community, the physical media community that would seek something like this out. By the way, autographed the first, is it the first 1,000, I believe, is autographed by you, Brink?
Yeah, yes, and I did that because I'm so happy that this movie is coming out, and I want everyone to see it, and I wanted it to be something really special. So when Fred mentioned the possibility of signing them, I was all for it. And it took me a few days to get through 1,000 of them, but it's a real collector's item, and that's what I want. I want people to honor and respect this movie because I'm very proud of it. I think it's certainly one of the best things I've ever done,
It's
and
it's
I'm
wonderful.
happy they're finally seeing it.
So the legacy of it, Fred. What do you in your commentary? You kind of, it seems like maybe you hadn't watched it in a while, and you're like, this is better than I remember it being. It's a fantastic movie. What do you think about it now, moving forward into where we are now?
Well, again, you have to, even though it's from the camera negatives, it picks up little bits of dust in the air when they transfer it. So it had a little speckling going on here and there, a lot more than you see because I worked on it an awful lot. So in doing that, I had to watch it over and over again. And I watched it, and you look at it and you kind of go, it just about has everything. I mean, this movie's got it all. And I was reminded of what a great cast. And this is kind of why, because it comes at a time when Brink was doing other films and I was doing other films, but you're always kind of working for the man. You know what I mean? And so if you're willing to risk your own money, you can have things your way. Like if it was another film and I was doing this at Trans World or Cinetel or someplace like that, Robert Clark would probably never have gotten the role of the Doctor. It's just, but since I was willing to take it on the chin with my own money, I can have things my way. And there's a value in that. And so for me, of course, the risk is that you'll lose this money and people go, oh, it's such a low budget movie. I said, yeah, but in its time, in those dollars, it was $140,000 cash money out of my personal account. And I say to people who chide you and they go, oh, what a low budget movie. I said, do you have 140,000? Most people will save for 10 or 15 years to get half of that amount of money in the bank so they can put a down payment on their house. But I risked it all on a 6-day horror movie. So it's 140 grand isn't that low when you think about going into your bank account and putting that money down and taking that chance. But we all did. And we pitched in, and I feel like we created something. And now that the rights have come back to me, I will do everything I can so that people can see this movie, because I really believe it's worthwhile, and I do believe it's Brink's best movie. And I don't mind saying that because I made it. But she's right; she's the star of this film. She carries this movie, and it's like a Lifetime women's thriller. Almost everything in the film is seen through the eyes of the central character. And you really get that in this film. And I was very happy with it. I was really happy with it. And it was very House of Usher. I mean, we went everywhere. We went everywhere with this film and all the little things that we liked from other movies and stuff like that. And Michael Berryman, it was good that was a dream.
One of my favorite things was when I was in the coffin and I wake up in it and I'm trying to get out, and it's based on this nightmare I've been having, but it's really happening, and that kind of puts me over the edge of insanity. And I love that music, da, 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 Chuck's music. It was just so much fun to shoot that
I will
scene.
tell you that we went to Chuck and we played him the score from the Broadway movie Phantom of the Opera. And if you are familiar with that score, there is a big number in that where the music goes dun 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 dun. And I said, I want that. I don't want to rip it off, but I want that. And that's exactly what you're talking about. It's coming right out of Phantom of the Opera. And it's very funny, though, because, Brink, you and I had gone to see Phantom of the Opera on Broadway.
Yep.
And I was very impressed with that cue. And if you people have that soundtrack CD of the play, you will see that music there is very inspired.
It is, and also at the very beginning when I'm walking toward the coffin kind of slowly, and
yes,
the beginning of the movie, that music is so evocative.
I think it's one of Chuck's best scores, and I'm surprised sometimes on TV I'll see a movie and it has music from Haunting Fear in someone else's movie.
Wow.
And it was kind of like, I don't know if it was it wasn't like Halloween, but The Fog, I think it was, you know what I mean? I think it was very kind of like some of the John Carpenter scores. It was it gets into your head.
Mm-hmm.
It gets into your head. And I think he should put out a soundtrack CD. Just saying, Chuck, if you're out there.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, because he did it for Evil Tunes and he did it for Dinosaur Island. I think there's a Haunting Fear soundtrack album out there somewhere waiting to happen.
It is Carpenter-esque, and it comes from that era and it didn't last a whole lot further than that. It's come back, but that era of the synth score, that synthesizer score that has such an evocative, I mean, there's nothing else like it, and this is a great one. So yeah, if he's watching out, that'd be wonderful.
He'll get around to it.
Yeah,
I think.
You guys want to open it up for some questions from our audience here? Are we ready for that?
Yep.
Let me take a drink of scotch here before.
Go for it.
I've just got water.
Let her rip.
All right, so this one's for Brink. WolfToy13 asks, Brink, what was your most challenging part that pushed you past your regular limits of acting?
Well, as I sort of touched on already, it was slowly going crazy, and then being in the coffin and finally going over the edge of crazy. And I did a similar kind of role around the same time period in Grandmother's House, a Nico Mastorakis film, where I've escaped from a lunatic asylum and I'm trying to reunite with my 2 teenage children, but I'm scaring them and you know, I do crazy things. So I really love that challenge of playing crazy, but not being too over the top about it, to try to be realistic. Like in the photo that's up on the screen, if you guys are seeing that, I think I've just killed the Delia character. And it's sort of like, oh my God, what have I done? And I had that moment in Grandmother's House too, where after I've stabbed the sheriff repeatedly, I have this look about, what have I just done? So that's what I like about, you know, layering these kind of characters.
That's a great moment too, because it's almost like she's embarrassed because she sees Jan Michael Vincent has just watched her kill this girl, and she kind of looks up and it's like she's embarrassed by what she's done. And I will say that we saw Grandmother's House, and Brink running after these people was definitely an inspiration for her running out the front door there. I liked what I saw in Grandmother's House, and we kind of grabbed it a little bit.
And it was funny because Delia is an Amazon. She's huge and tall, and I'm this tiny little thing, so I'm running after her with a butcher knife.
You know what they say, though? They're all the same size when they're on the ground. Yeah.
There's a story about Delia in the commentary that I don't know that we want to share here, but it's worth listening to the commentary just for a Sylvester Stallone connection.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, Eric Sputnik, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. If you could do a sequel to any of your films, which one would it be? I guess that's for both of you guys.
You go ahead, Brink.
Well, it would have been this one. I mean, that's why I wrote a script, but you know, it was like Fred said, 10 years too late, and people really hadn't had a lot of access to the first one. So this one, I think, because I lived till the end, so many of my movies I die. And it's rare to make it all the way to the end credits. This would have been a good one.
How many actresses can say that? That was the first movie that was for a long time where I didn't die.
Well, yes, and I've had the most colorful deaths in Hollywood, where you know, I've been shot with arrows in the back slave girls and pulled apart by demons and sorority babes, and had my throat slit in grandmother's house. And then in Rattlers 2 recently, it was death by rattlesnake. And I'm about to have my head bitten off by a Tyrannosaurus Rex, which I think is going to be the best death yet.
Wow.
It's my legacy.
That's it. That's a legacy of death. That should be your biography.
Oh. Fred, what about you?
Yeah, I'm good. Completely honest with you, I don't have any movies that I'd like to make a sequel to.
Okay. Our next question.
It's you know what I mean. I hate to say it. I mean, money wise, there's some money in certain things, but to me, to get excited about stuff, I have to look forward. I can't look back and get excited about anything. I have to think about something brand new. Although some people might suggest that some of the films that we've made are simply remakes of our earlier films. So maybe I'm making sequels, and I have made sequels. I mean, I don't know how many movies I've made with the number 2 behind the title, but I've made a lot of them. But it's all for money. It's all about money.
Volker Steiber. I hope I'm pronouncing Volker. I hope that's right. Since this was a STAG film, if you had extra footage, could you use it in another film, a la Jess Franco, or do you have to write new contracts?
No, you can reuse footage. You have to pay the actor again for the footage. The fact that actually has happened a few times. When we were at Royal Oaks, there was a movie with Frederick Forrest, and they wanted to use his sequence. He was a general in the army or something. They wanted to use it in a movie called Crash Dive with Michael Dudikoff, and they gave Fred Forrest $5,000, and they lifted the scene on. If you watch The Marksman with Wesley Snipes, there's a 10-minute sequence in there that I directed in a movie called Active Stealth. The movie with Wesley Snipes ran short, and they figured that they could take this 10 minutes from my movie and put it into his movie, and no one would notice. And so if you see The Marksman, I directed 10 minutes of that movie.
I also, talking about extra footage, this is an opportunity to talk about, there's extra footage of Brink that was shot. It's like lost footage. I believe it's branded as like the Lost Brinke Stevens movie. You want to talk about that a little bit?
That was more of the movie that didn't happen.
Yeah.
We went around, and sometimes when we were in different places, we would just shoot footage for a movie we thought we would make someday. And I'm really disappointed we didn't do it in London. The idea was to walk into a building and then shoot the interiors later here. So we had Brink in San Francisco, and she literally walked in front of an oncoming streetcar just so you knew she was in San Francisco. And then we did some stuff in New England and in Salem and all of that. And it was for a movie called The Coven, and Sean O'Bannon wrote a script, which I saw in one of the boxes the other day. And but it was just one of those films that we just never got around to doing. I mean, I've got a ton of things that we started filming bits and pieces of that we never finished, but that was a fun one. But it was just strange because we found the footage, and amazingly enough, all the negative is still in the lab. I saw it there 2 days ago. I was sorting through stuff, and I saw a whole box of footage, bits and pieces, just stuff that we shot.
Brink, is Fred always working? You guys go on vacation, and he's like, let's film this. Is there ever just like, let's turn the camera off for a minute?
No, I loved it. I had found these costumes, the blue dress and the gray cape, at a thrift store. So most of my luggage was these costumes, and Fred brought his Bolex camera along, and we just shot all over the Salem area. And, we just had so much fun. I love it when you can do a working vacation.
Yeah.
You can write it off on your taxes as a business trip.
That's right. It's just smart. All right, let's see if we got another.
I'm kidding, but I probably really did do that.
Yeah. Darren Kersey asks, Delia Shepard is so darn good in this. What was she like working with?
Didn't we first see her at a club on Sunset? Didn't we go to watch her?
Yes,
doing
indeed.
like a burlesque kind of thing, not exactly a stripper.
No, your memory's better than mine.
It was
But
a very elegant, burlesque kind of show that she was doing at a club on Sunset Boulevard.
almost like a Blue
And
Angel sort of thing. Yeah.
yeah, she had this beautiful evening gowns and stuff, and she was very classy. And I remember you were thinking about her for the movie. She had mentioned this club, so you took me and we watched her. And it's just like, wow, she's gorgeous. She's perfect.
Yeah, she was in a movie called Sex Bomb with Bob Quarry and Linnea. And I have some kind of credit on it. I didn't really do anything, but I saw her, and she was stunning looking, a Jean Harlow-esque sort of actress. And she was good. She had some kind of an accent. I'm trying to think of what it was, but she had some kind of an
Yeah,
accent.
it
But
was
she
almost
was
like
great as the bad girl. And some of the language in that film, I'd forgotten that we allowed some of the things that go on in that film that we had. But I guess it's another case of being able to do what you want without anybody stopping you.
Didn't she go to Las Vegas eventually and
She became
become
the ringmaster at Cirque du Soleil.
Oh, okay.
I think she may still be there.
Wow.
Although I did hear from her not too long ago, and I think she works with Jim Wynorski once in a while.
Yeah, she
All
was a
right.
very nice girl and absolutely gorgeous, very tall and statuesque. And I think she might have been Danish or something. That might have been her accent.
Yeah, maybe something like that. And she was in the Rocky movie. She was Tommy Morrison's manager in one of the Rocky 3 or 4, something like that. So she was getting around at the time.
Super Widescreen asks, question from Volker to Fred. Can you tell us a little bit about how's working with Chuck Sereno? How did you meet him? Or how did you meet?
That's a good question. I probably met him through Jim Wynorski because I kind of started getting to know Jim around Transylvania Twist, which Brink was also in. And Chuck's scores, like for Deathstalker 2 and stuff, I really liked them. And so we met. And what I liked about Chuck is that if you watch the main titles, there's not just one theme. There's usually 3 themes, maybe more, blended together. And then he brings them back to life throughout the film separately in different cues, like Evil Tunes and Little Devils and Haunting Fear all have like several themes blended into one big piece. And then he brings them back and plays them out. And that's something that I always liked. And Chuck would do little cues, and then I'd go over to his house and we'd sit there and watch him. We'd watch the movie with the cue, and you'd say, I want a stinger here, or I want this to be more jolting here, or could we make them feel sorry for her? Could she be more sympathetic? Music has a tremendous impact on movies, because now I'm doing like Lifetime Channel, Chris and Thriller.
I think we've lost Fred's audio. Has anyone else?
I can't hear it either.
Yeah, okay. It's not just me. Okay, I think we've lost Fred's audio.
I'll talk about Chuck while you're trying to get him back on.
He's still talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, I showed up for a movie shoot and Chuck was doing camera. And I'm like, Chuck, you're a composer. What are you doing holding a video camera? And he's like, well, I went to film school. This is what I was really trained to do. So Grant Austin Waldman, the producer who did Teenage Exorcist, which I wrote and starred in, along with Eddie Deason, wanted to shoot a movie in Florida recently, like within last year. It was supposed to be last year, and I was going to direct it. And Chuck was going to be my cameraman. I had recommended him, and Grant was like, sure, that'd be great. So Chuck Sereno and I were both in Florida at the same time, and we literally went through every page of the script I had written at the locations. And, we're doing like this. Okay, well, if we put the camera here, then that tree will hide that billboard and things like that. So we walked through every single page of the script. We were all ready to go around February or March of last year, and then COVID hit. So needless to say, it's a movie called Tears of a Clown. It's kind of a horror comedy, a little takeoff on It kind of a thing. But I was so looking forward to working with Chuck on that. And we were really on the same page. He's a wonderful cinematographer and a great composer.
You've got a ton of projects that are either in development or that are, according to IMDb, that are in production right now. Can you tell us just a little bit about what's going on?
Yeah, I looked at my IMDb and because I wanted to see how many movies I was up to now, and so many of them say pre-production, but many of them have been shot. They're actually in post-production. But I was slated to direct 3 movies last year. Tears of a Clown was the biggest one. We'd shoot it in Cocoa Beach, Florida. And then I was going to co-direct with Dave Dakota on a remake of Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bolorama, and then another film in Florida. And then Eddie was going to be in the one in Cocoa Beach, but then Eddie had some, I think, heart trouble or something. He was in the hospital. And you back? Hey. So we're hoping that, I saw a question here about Eddie. We're hoping that Eddie recovers his health and that COVID goes away and that we can all shoot these movies together again.
Yeah. Okay, do we have another question ready to go here? Let's see. Brendan Bakos says, "Hi guys, I got a question for Brink. Wow, what a performance, Brink. Were you given much say in the performances in Haunting Fear? Also, do you recall how many hours per day you worked on the film in 6 days? Yeah, in 89 or 90. That's what I can see. And it looks like it keeps going, but that's enough."
I don't remember. I mean, I was in so much of the movie that I must have worked, long days, but it didn't feel long. I loved all of the stuff like in the kitchen where the coffee's perking and I'm on the floor and, I'm serving dinner on paper plates and things like that. It never felt like it was long shooting days because I was enjoying it so much.
All right. Oh, Jason Paul Collum. Fred, why do you think so many of the movies by you, David Dakota, Jim Wynorski, with Brink, Linnea, and Michelle, still resonate 30 plus years later?
Well, they're beautiful. They're beautiful girls. And they have great personalities that I think come through the screen. And I think because they've never set themselves up in such a way that they're unapproachable. I think people feel like they've come to know these girls. I mean, even like they meet them at conventions and see them, then they have a connect between the real person and the person that they see on screen. And I think sometimes there's sort of a I don't know, it's an unwritten bond or something that, once you kind of met somebody, you feel like, I always said, if I meet somebody at a convention and I'm nice to them and we have a couple words, I said that person will go away and try to watch every movie I've ever made. And I think the girls, especially for some fans, they're usually empowered. That's the other part that I don't subscribe to in most of my films is I don't like girls as victims. These girls are usually the ones you have to look out for. These are the girls who you have to be on your toes, and they're powerful. They're powerful and empowered, whether they're demon possessed or simply wielding a chainsaw, to an ancient Egyptian god. They're not shrieking, running rape victims. And I think people admire that. They admire that strength and stuff that these beautiful girls show. And they're funny. They're funny. They're good actresses.
We were a phenomenon that was so 80s because most of the horror stars up to that point had been men. Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, and there were a few Hammer horror actresses, but we were in so much stuff and we were a trio. We were all so different. We looked different and we had different personalities and we did a lot of conventions so people could actually meet us, like Fred said, and get to know us and, go home with a photo and having talked to us for a few minutes. So it was such a wonderful phenomenon, the Scream Queen thing that was of its era. And, they still call women Scream Queens, but not like the 80s.
No. So there's a lot of pretenders to the thrones, I'll tell you.
There were back then too. I mean, everyone was trying to say, "Oh, I'm a scream queen," when they're really a mud wrestler or something like that. But
oh, I used to go through Chiller, and there'd be a girl standing there with a scream queen, and she'd have some photos and stuff. And I said, "Listen," I said, "if you haven't worked for Jim Wynorski, Dave Dakota, or Fred Olen Ray, or stood in a swamp waist deep in water in the middle of the night for Roger Corman, you're not a scream queen." And I still feel that way.
I had a swamp story. We mentioned Jason Paul Cullum earlier. In one of his October Moon, November Sun movies, I have to wade into this pond. I slowly open the coffin, and hands reach out and grab me, and I'm screaming. And I went into the house to shower, and there's slime all over my skin and my hair, and I just start laughing hysterically in the shower because I realized that we'll do things for a movie that we would never ever do in real life. I would never go into that pond. And I insisted on wearing shoes because I was afraid there were leeches and things in there. But I did it. I went in there because the script called for it. So I think that's why Linnea, Michelle, and I are popular, because we have such a good work ethic. You can put us through hell and we'll just smile.
Also, it was a different world. And when people start to evaluate the impact that these girls in the films they were in, I used to say, if you're on the right track, then your movie's on Joe Bob's Drive-In on Showtime. If you're on the right track, your movie's on HBO. If you're on the right track, your movie's on USA Up All Night. If a movie is only on a VHS that you produce in your house in a cardboard sleeve you've made, you may not be on the right track.
All right. James Aaron Thomas asks, any chance of a remaster and commentaried edition of Teenage Exorcist?
Do you have
Who's
any
that question for?
Well, originally you were going to do Teenage Exorcist, right? Because I remember that you had a flyer that you had made up with Don Wildsmith, I think, on the cover.
Shot some footage too. Shot film for it.
And you took it to the AFM and you were trying to raise money for it, but you didn't have a script. And so I asked you if I could write the script for Teenage Exorcist. So Ted Newsom and I worked on that one together. And then you never made it, but somehow Grant started Teenage Exorcist.
Right.
And it was fun, but the Teenage Exorcist was supposed to be a girl, a high school girl. And this predated Buffy.
It was Buffy the Teenage Exorcist. I mean, holy moly, if they had just stuck with the original concept, they were ahead of the time, because there was no Buffy the Vampire Slayer at that point.
Yeah.
And they would have been sitting on the title.
No, it hadn't happened yet.
Right.
And I guess for some reason they couldn't find a teenage girl to play the Exorcist. Not that they don't get off the bus every day in Hollywood, but he ended up hiring his friend Eddie Deason to play the Teenage Exorcist, and Eddie was clearly not a teenager. So I was at lunch rewriting the script, rewriting the pages that we were going to be shooting right after lunch. And it was really kind of falling apart. I was trying to hold it together as best I could. But I think, it has some charm to it.
It's a very interesting history, because I think Grant, who may or may not be watching this now, Grant was making a movie called Talking About Sex. That was the name of the movie, and it was going to have Jacqueline Bisset. And it was almost like Haunting Fear. He had everything set up. He had the cast, or he had a crew, and he had the money and everything. And the guy who was casting, Jerry Wolf, could not produce Jacqueline Bisset, even though he said he could. He couldn't. In the 12th hour, Grant didn't have a movie. So he called me and he said, everything's ready to go. Do you have anything I can film? It's almost Haunting Fear all over again. I said, yes, I've got Teenage Exorcist, and you can cast this on the telephone tonight, because every part was written for an actor we already know. And we sent him over the script, much like we did with Roger Corman and Step Monster. We sent him over the script, and they bought it. And they literally, I think they did. They got on the telephone that night, and almost all the parts had been written for people that Brink or I knew. And they cast this film. And at the time, we had had some luck with Eddie Deason and Mob Boss and Beverly Hills Vamp. So I think Grant felt like putting Eddie in there was a substitute for or was enough of a name to carry his international sales and stuff. Whether or not that happened or not, I don't know. But that's how we ended up becoming involved in selling Teenage Exorcist. Although Ted Newsom dropped out. He dropped out of the script at the rewrite phase. I asked for some rewrites, and he didn't want to do them. So he stepped aside, and Brink said, "I'll do them." And I said, "Great, we'll continue with you." And we just went on forward with Brink as the sole writer on that script.
I see a comment here, the one with the ferrets that are supposed to be playing rats. They were very talented ferrets, although they didn't look too much like rats, but they were pets of Grant Austin Waldman's. So that's why there's ferrets on the stairs, and they're described as rats.
Didn't someone turn into Grant's Rottweiler dog? He had two Rottweilers. He gave me one, which was Roxy, and one was called Buddy. And Brink, do you turn into a Rottweiler?
I think that might have happened, yeah.
Turned into one of Grant's dogs, and a male dog.
So. Yeah, I know. It was just a crazy script because, you know, like I said, it wasn't written for Eddie, and so to have to keep changing it. And, you know, there were lines like the teenage exorcist girl in the script says, "Oh, look at the time, Mom's expecting me home." And, you know, that's not really something Eddie could say. So, but he made it fun, like when he's going back and forth on his little motor scooter and stuff.
And that was shot at the same house that we shot Inner Sanctum and Evil Tunes and Spirits.
Oh, was it?
Yes.
Huh.
Same exact house. And there's a body fall off the top of the rail up there.
Yes. Yeah. He, what was his name? The guy that falls. He was in a painting for the Teenage Exorcist.
Was it Hoke Howell?
Hoke, that was it. Hoke.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he played my father, right, in Teenage Exorcist.
I believe so. He's in the coffin at the beginning of Haunting Fear.
Right.
He was Dud Wash on the Andy Griffith Show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Roger Durkin asks, I hope all you're having fun. Hope you're all having fun. And what's your fave movie you've both worked in? Cheers.
I'll let Brink go first.
Well, I liked all of our work together. I was fond of Bad Girls from Mars. Do you remember that with Edie Williams? And I think we only had 4 days to shoot it. And I remember you walking through the set, ripping pages out of the script and going, "Now we're on schedule."
It's a quick way to get where you're going.
Yeah.
We did so many. I mean, my first show with Brink was when she played David Carradine's wife in Warlords. And that was a little movie.
And Sid Haig was in that.
Sid Haig was in that, and Bob Corey, and Dawn, and Hope. Maybe Fox Harris was in that too. I remember. There's one that really needs a redoing for people. But I like Bad Girls from Mars because it was about a low-budget film company making a low-budget movie. So that, and some of us, you know, Gary Graver plays.
Uh-oh. Do you hear him, Brink?
No.
Okay. Well, let's see. We've lost them again. Okay. Well, this looks like it's for you after all. So James Aaron Thomas asks, could you update the script and make it now? Especially since it's been given new life and circulation. So you wrote the sequel script. What do you think?
If I could find the original script that I wrote, there was another person who optioned it, a filmmaker that had worked for Paramount as a TV director. And he was interested in making it, but his ego was so involved that he changed so much of the script. Like he gave me a twin sister, which I'd never had in there. And so many things changed when he got a hold of it. And it just wasn't my script anymore.
Yeah.
So I would have to go back and see if I can find an original version that I had written before he got his hands on it and changed so much about it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I understand Fred's perspective about, you know, sequels and, you know, updates and things like that. But some of this stuff really, there, he's back. Okay. Fred is back.
Did you lose me at some point?
Yes, we lost you again.
You know, I think if anybody calls this telephone, it boots me off because I was right in the middle of telling you something, and then all of a sudden something happened. So it couldn't have been important, whatever it was.
Okay, Warlock, question for Fred. I originally supported your Kickstarter campaign for Spedora a few years ago. What was your impression of the crowdfunding process?
You know, it was the first and only time that I've actually done this, and I did it on a dare because I was always saying that I never thought that anybody raised money. I always thought people fell short of their goals. And a guy named Randy Carter, who worked with us, he said, Fred, he goes, you're wrong. And he said, I'll bet you if you set a realistic goal, don't ask for too much money, that your fans will come out and they'll support you. And I said, well, I've never made a short film in my life. I didn't believe in it because I thought if you didn't make a feature, you'd never get your money back. So, but I did have a pet project called Spedora. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna do this. And we got it. I mean, we didn't ask for a lot. It was $15,000 we were trying to raise. The show cost $30,000 to make. And it only shot 2 days, if you can imagine. In the old days, we would have made a whole feature for $30,000. But it was 15 minutes long, but it won a ton of awards, and we were very happy. And we're very proud of it. And the poster is right behind me, right here. And it's one of the things that I'm most proud of. If somebody says, oh, what can I see of yours? I would show them that movie because I love it. I love that film. And people think, oh, the first thing they think is, oh, I'm surprised it wasn't a horror film. I said, yeah, you might think it's a horror film, but it's a love story. And, you know, it's about trying to find acceptance when you're different, you know, from everybody else. So I thought the crowdfunding thing was okay. I was surprised the money went to Amazon, who then took a big chunk out of it, and you had to take it from Amazon. And then, of course, you have to fulfill all the perks and stuff, which, you know, the shipping alone and all that stuff. So you don't really get the access to the 15 grand that you raised, but it did give me some faith in the process.
All right, we're closing in on our final 15 minutes here. Just a few more minutes beyond 15 minutes. So if you got a question, shoot it in here, and we'll get to it. We got one from Andrew Gilmore. If Brink, Linnea, and Michelle were in a movie playing scientists who could magically end the pandemic, what do you think would happen in it?
I love playing scientists. And Michelle made a good scientist in one of the movies. I hope this pandemic thing gets over pretty fast. I ended up making 8 movies last year despite COVID. And 4 of them I had to fly to different states to do it. But I was double masked and everybody was getting tested on set and, you know, temperatures taken every day. So we were very, very careful. But, you know, I just can't wait to get back into production on films. I'm waiting for that.
Yeah. All right. Captain Howdy 666 asks, is there a Bad Girls from Mars release possibility?
Here's the thing. I saw the negative in the vault the other day. The movie that was put out by Lionsgate is about 8 minutes shorter than the real film. They couldn't get an R rating, even though there's no sex in the movie. They said just the preponderance of undressed women was problematic for them. So they had to cut 8 minutes of the movie out in order to get it on to, at the time, VHS. And that's a movie that's at Lionsgate. I still own it, but they won't report. They literally, I said, listen, you've put it out on DVD now, it's on Netflix, it's this, it's this. We would like a report. They said, you know, if you think you got a problem, sue us. I said, are you serious? They said, yeah, we're not going to fulfill our contract. So the question is, of course, again, there's no Blu-ray in the future because I'm sitting on the negative, and the last thing in the world I would do is give them access to that negative. Although I did see a 1-inch the other day, and it was 89 minutes long, and I'm wondering if that's the uncut Bad Girls from Mars. But if I could get the rights back, a beautiful Blu-ray uncut with all of the footage would be in your future.
What can we do to help? How can we make that happen? Can we storm someone's email? Can we?
You can't even get them to talk to you about it. I want to put out Deathmaster, which we put out originally, and we paid to help restore the film. And then it fell from the company that had it to Lionsgate. They won't even talk to you about sub-licensing that film to you. And perhaps they might look into Bad Girls from Mars if I promised them an HD master from the negative, because they're never getting access to the negative, ever. Same thing was when Troma was, I mean, there was no way that somebody who doesn't report to you, who does not live up to their bargain and the deal they made with you, am I going to help you going forward? So I would love to bring out Bad Girls from Mars. It was a great little movie. I loved it. I love watching it. It's great.
Trevor Anderson asks, Fred, who's the bigger diva, Brinke Stevens or Steven Seagal?
How can you ask such a question?
I'm not a diva, but Steven is.
Brink was always on time. She's always prepared. She's a pleasure to work with. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Ken Brunette asks, hi, Brink, what can you tell us about Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bolorama? That looked like a blast.
Well, yeah, it was. I mean, it was a really fun movie. And then one day, a year ago or so, Charlie Van called me and said, we're remaking Sorority Babes. And I'm like, so, I got killed in the first movie. He's not going to ask me to reprise my role. And he said, I'd like you to direct it. I'm like, whoa, okay. So I read the script, and it's almost a shot-for-shot remake of the original movie, but with new girls and unknown girls. And, the reason is they want to introduce a whole new generation, a whole new audience to this film. But the first one was just so perfect, with Mila and Michelle in it and the boys. I don't think it's a movie that really needs to be remade, but I don't want to talk myself out of a job either.
Yeah. Wind Sorrow. Any plans for Spirit 1990 Blu-ray?
Again, it's another film that's owned by Lionsgate. And I looked in the vault the other day, and I didn't see the negative. So I may have given it back to the people who financed the movie. We have, I think we could do something foreign. But domestically, it belongs to Lionsgate. But I always wondered about the possibility of doing foreign Blu-ray and then just importing them into the U.S. But I don't see, they don't seem to have any interest in it. I think it's on Amazon Prime. But again, I think they only have access to the 1-inch tape they got originally, and it'll be a cold day in hell that they get hold of the negative from us. Because they haven't treated us right. If you don't treat me right, you can't come back and ask for a favor. So that's how a lot of these films end up at, and get lost.
All right. Derek Hinkle asks, will Dinosaur Island get a Blu-ray release?
We tried. The film elements, Rogers lost the film elements to that in 60-foot centerfold. And a lot of the effects were all digitally composited. And we did everything we could to up-res that thing to Blu-ray from the elements that exist. And they weren't satisfactory. So we went with a DVD. And we had thought about it later that we could maybe put a standard def copy on Blu-ray at a much higher elevated bit rate, which would increase the quality dramatically. But we didn't think of it at the time. So we just went with a DVD. And I don't know that there's a Blu-ray other than maybe a standard def Blu-ray at a high bit rate of an SD copy.
All right. Derek Rogers, a question for both Brinke Stevens and Jason Paul Cullum. Will there be an October Moon 3? And Brink, would you come back for it?
I think it was always Jason Paul Cullum's plan to have a trilogy. And I think he's still thinking about doing a third movie. And I would definitely love to be in it. I like my character in that. And I'm in a lot of the film. I'm in some really good key scenes. So I hope there'll be a third one. his movie Safe Inside came out recently on DVD and Blu-ray, and that's a fun film. It's a guy who's in a house that he thinks is haunted, and I'm his best friend that he has come over. And I'm sort of playing the guy role where I'm the one going around with a flashlight going, "You're safe, there's nothing here." And that's why it's called Safe Inside. But it turns out there really is something in the house.
Captain Howdy 666. Any future classic titles you will be releasing as retro media double features? Can you let us know, Fred? Brink, can you? Oh, this is a two-parter. Brink, can you tell us what it was like doing Slave Girl from Beyond Infinity?
Ladies first.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Slave Girls was fun. It was one of my first movies, and I was not originally cast in it. I had auditioned, and they hired someone else. And then they worked with her for one day and they fired her. So they called me and said, "We need you. Can you come in tomorrow?" And I did. I liked my role very much. I thought it was elegant, but it was basically the most dangerous game. And I was playing Fay Ray's part. And I happened to watch the most dangerous game after I had shot Slave Girls. And I'm like, he's copying dialogue word for word. But it was nice to have, an outer space kind of theme to it.
All right. So, Fred, any future classic titles released as a retro media double feature?
Well, we're always working on something. The biggest thing, of course, is trying to find materials. And, I've been collecting. I collect stuff and transfer it, clean it up, and I'll spend my time. And, I've grabbed a bunch of Buster Crab jungle films from the 40s, and I'm still always looking for Lugosi stuff and, Lon Chaney Jr. and things like that. So we have a lot of stuff. People will complain sometimes that we don't announce what we're doing, but it's a competitive market, and I don't like to stretch myself out a little bit. Obviously, we're going to continue. We've transferred Little Devils and Angel Eyes, and we've got some other great stuff that we're planning to do, which one of them I think will maybe surprise people is Nightshade. And if you don't know what Nightshade is, then you don't need to be surprised.
I just want to say again how much I love that you dig so deep into some of these things, because I love that era as well. I love, there's so much history there and so much entertainment value. And I love that you've put out some, I'll hold this up again because this is also something that has just come out. It's this double feature. And you really present this stuff in better quality than we can find anywhere else. And so I just want to say thank you for that. I appreciate
It's hard because a lot of these things, the negatives are long gone. 35 prints are almost non-existent. I was very happy with the Ape Man. I've been looking myself for a good copy of the Ape Man for most of my adult life. And I finally came across one and I said, you know what, this is for me. And it wasn't the first Ape Man print that we had tried to acquire. We'd gotten some others and spent money to transfer them, only to find out that we thought they were inferior. And I didn't want to foist that on the public. But I finally hit on a copy of the Ape Man that I thought was the very best I've ever seen. And I was extremely happy to bring it out.
All right, we've got about 5 minutes left. And this question comes from Sandman Cinema. Do you think any of your movies would be well served by a remake, or are they best left alone? That's for both of you guys.
I love them just the way they are. I wouldn't remake any of my films that I've been in.
Yeah, me either. I mean, why? I don't get it, because again, most of them were, like I said, it's they're sort of a product of the time that we made them in. They were for a market that existed and a time when this was it's a new thing right now. I look at TV commercials and I said, their special effects budget on this TV commercial far exceeds the budgets of the entire films that we're making. How do we compete? It's the same old story. That's why I'm in television. People go, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Because TV movies is where the work is for someone like myself. Although I do have a pet project that I am working on, and it'll be just what everybody's looking for when it happens. And I'm going to probably finance it myself, so I'm probably in pretty good shape.
Super Widescreen asks, question to Fred, can we expect you to write a book with all your great stories? Oh yeah, I just want to support that one. That needs to happen.
You know, it's been in the works. You know, I don't talk about myself very often, but a few years ago, I was in a terrible health situation, and I got out and I realized that if I didn't do something soon, there might not be any time left for me to do it at all. And so I connected. I can't really write anything anymore because I've lost the use of this one hand, which is my right hand. But I got together with Steve Latshaw, and we did a series of extensive interviews. Steve's very good at that. And we were trying to do a book similar to the Bogdanovich book on Orson Welles, which was basically sort of an interview book, because I thought that's the only way this is going to happen. So we did the interviews. We've transcribed them. Had someone transcribe them, and we're kind of editing it now, getting rid of the stories that we don't want to tell about people that we might have said in the heat of the thing, and organizing things. And so, yeah, there is a book. It's going to be a big one, though. It's going to be huge. I don't know who will publish it or where it'll be available, but you're going to be able to stand on it to change a light bulb when it's over. It's that thick.
I want to read it.
You also
you're all over it.
You also Fred, you had a podcast a while back. You did a podcast. You did maybe a dozen episodes, and I would recommend that because there's some good stories from behind the scenes there.
Yeah, I didn't think anybody was listening to it, so I kind of stopped it. It was easy to do, but I thought, was it because I can't type? I thought, oh well, I'll just tell people stuff. But I found that maybe 100 people were listening, or 120 people, and I thought, you know what? I don't have the time, you know, or the energy to do that. If that's all the people that are interested in it, then I don't need to do it. You know, I might come back because people have asked me about Herb Strock and Larry Buchanan and some of the people I used to know. So maybe an Ed Wood, maybe.
I enjoyed it. The archive is still there, so people can go listen to those.
Yeah, it's not really an archive. I guess I could do it. I could do one today if I wanted to. It's just whether anybody wants it. I mean, if nobody wants to hear it, there's no sense in doing it. So.
Looks like we have two left. Brink, this is from #JBC.
I just wanted to mention that Fred and I are both interviewed in a documentary that's coming up about cult cinema called Exploit It. And so I recommend that to people. They interviewed me for like 2.5 or 3 hours, and it should be very thorough about cult cinema.
You'll never get that time back.
Jason Paul Cullum asks, Brink, a photo book of your career coming in the future?
Hi, Jason. Yeah, I think so. I had to excavate this huge walk-in closet to find some photo albums with my wedding pictures for Dave Stevens. They're doing a documentary about him. And I was looking through my photo albums and going, wow, I've got some great stuff here. So if it can be done cheaply enough to print color photos and things, I would love to do a photo book and a little autobiography kind of a thing.
And I've got a ton of those photos.
Yes, I know. I want to see them. For some reason, I've kept the slide book on every movie literally I've ever made. Mob Boss is 2 gigantic binders that are literally 12 to 13 inches tall. That's how many. There are thousands. Haunting Fear, thousands of slides. You pick out 50 of the best ones, and then the rest of them go into a notebook. Don't forget to show those to me before you leave.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, this is our last question, and of course, it's a doozy. David asks, Fred, your top 3 filmmaking rules.
For myself or for actors?
That's a good question.
You know, I'll tell you, Roger Corman, even though when I started working with Roger, I'd already made movies that with budgets that far exceeded most of Roger's budgets. Roger gives you a little 5-tip speech, no matter who you are. And he felt obliged to give it to me. And I've always tried to remember it because I could write a book on things that I feel like people should do in making their films. But Roger used to say, sit down as much as possible. He would say, never shoot a blank wall when there's a window in the room. If you can't move the actors, move the camera. What was the other one? He said, he always said you should start a scene with a wide shot that shows the geography of the set or the location and get back as far as you can. And if you have to go outside an open doorway, as long as you don't shoot the frame of the doorway, you can go out the doorway and shoot the big scene. So I still do, if it's the first scene in a house, the very first shot will be a wide shot that shows the geography. Once I've shown you the geography of the living room, any subsequent scenes later, I don't feel obliged to do that. But mostly I like people who are on time. We like people who are prepared. And no attitude, please. I can't stand people losing their temper and shouting on sets. And a lot of us know what that's like to have that happen. And it doesn't work. Making an actor really nervous and jumpy is not going to make for a better performance. It's just not going to happen.
All right.
Well said.
That's it. That's going to do it for this virtual launch party of Haunting Fear on Blu-ray. I just want to promote these one more time. These are available right now. These are currently, both of these releases are Makeflix exclusives for it was for 30 days, so a few more weeks into March, but I can't recommend them enough. Haunting Fear looks absolutely gorgeous, and this has been an absolute delight to talk to both of you about this wonderful movie. I'm so glad that we get to see it, we get to celebrate it, and we get to talk to you about what it was like being there and making it. So thank you so much for your time and for being here.
I appreciate everybody who tuned in. Thank you guys for watching.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks.
And just remember, Makeflix took 50% of the 1,000 units that are available. So by the time it gets to Amazon, there'll be less than 50% of them left because I gave Brink a bunch too.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
All right, well, guys, I guess that's. Oh, there's a link. I think maybe we could even click that link to buy it, possibly. Maybe not. But it's at Makeflix. So, guys, thanks so much for being here. Thanks to everyone that showed up to join us for this party. We appreciate you so much. For Brinke Stevens, for Fred Olen Ray, Makeflix, Retro Media, Cereal Midnight. I'm Heath, and we have had a blast, guys. Take care. Have a great night, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.